Elvis Presley. Elvis was a collector of cars and planes, and that was his.
On November 22nd, 2025, a team of investigators broke the seal on Elvis Presley's private jet after 48 years of undisturbed silence. And what they recovered inside that aircraft dismantled the version of history most people had accepted without question. Hidden compartments, sealed letters dated July 1977, audio reels labeled with dates that extended past his death, and a cockpit entry referencing fuel calibration on August 15th, one day before he reportedly died. All of it had been sitting in a locked hangar outside Roswell, New Mexico, waiting for exactly the right moment to surface. Most people who drove past the small regional airfield on the outskirts of Roswell never noticed the aging structure sitting at the far edge of the runway, and that invisibility was, as it turned out, entirely intentional. The hangar looked the way forgotten things look: faded metal walls, a roof slightly warped from decades of desert heat, doors that never moved. Nothing about it suggested value. Nothing about it invited a second glance. And sealed inside it, gathering dust in complete darkness, rested a machine that had once carried one of the most recognizable human beings on Earth through the sky in velvet and gold. Elvis Presley's personal aircraft had sat in that structure since the late 1970s, grounded quietly after his death in August 1977, as though someone had decided quite deliberately that its journeys were finished and that what remained inside it was better left exactly where it was. The cabin of that jet had once operated as a flying sanctuary, red velvet lining the walls, gold-plated fixtures catching soft cabin light during night flights across the country. Crystal glasses held steady in fitted holders designed to absorb turbulence without a sound. Decisions got made in that space. Songs were discussed. Long flights carried quiet conversations that never reached a single journalist or fan. And then the engine stopped, and the world kept moving, and the aircraft sat perfectly still inside a locked hangar, while 48 years accumulated around it like sediment. Maintenance records showed the last official service entry dated to the weeks immediately following Elvis's passing, and after that entry, nothing followed. No inspection, no recorded access of any kind. The aircraft door received a mechanical lock. The key passed to custodians who never touched it again, and the story of that jet quietly dropped out of public conversation. Legal disputes over ownership simmered for years before finally resolving in late 2025, when the aircraft sold at private auction to a buyer whose name was never publicly disclosed. What the new owner made clear was that no restoration work would begin until a full formal inspection had been completed, every seal broken under recorded supervision, every item inside cataloged without exception. 9:12 in the morning on November 22nd, 2025, the team arrived at the airfield carrying imaging equipment, preservation cases, and cameras that would record every step of what followed. 2 aviation inspectors led the group inside the hangar, accompanied by a legal representative, a private archivist, and a security detail. That desert morning carried a chill, but the hangar itself held something colder, a stillness that felt less like temperature and more like something compressed, waiting. When the wide doors finally rolled back, morning light stretched slowly across the nose of the jet, and the dust covering its surface softened what had once been a sharp, confident outline into something that looked more like a memory than a machine. Portable stairs were positioned against the fuselage. Cameras started recording. The mechanical lock resisted for a moment before turning with a heavy click that moved through the hangar like a small announcement. A wave of stale, metallic air rushed outward when the door swung open, carrying a scent that belonged entirely to 1977, and the team stepped inside to find a world that had simply stopped rather than decayed. Red carpeting had faded from deep crimson to a flat brown, but it held its shape across the entire floor without a single tear. Gold fixtures had lost their shine without losing their form. An ashtray near the main seating area still held hardened cigarette remnants, preserved in place by decades of dry, sealed air. A folded blanket rested across a lounge chair in the position someone leaves something when they intend to come back, and that detail, small as it was, settled over the team with unexpected weight. Nothing in the main cabin felt abandoned. Every object felt paused. Near the rear lounge, the archivist's attention caught on a leather-bound portfolio resting flat on the surface of a small dining table, covered in dust but structurally intact. Cross-referencing it against existing inventory records produced nothing. No mention anywhere in the documentation trail that such an item had ever been placed aboard the aircraft. Photographs came first, then gloved hands lifted the portfolio carefully into a sealed preservation case. And that's when the inspection of the door frame revealed something that stopped conversation entirely. Hardened sealant lined the inner edges of the cabin door, material that had no place in the original factory build. Small gaps in the wall panels had been deliberately filled. Ventilation openings had been blocked. Additional insulation, layered carefully behind the decorative panels running the full length of the cabin walls, completed a picture that could not be explained by simple storage. This aircraft had been sealed, carefully and with full knowledge of its construction, by someone who understood exactly what they were doing and why. At the rear of the cabin, a narrow corridor led to a solid wooden door separating the main lounge from Elvis Presley's private sleeping quarters. Original blueprints described that door as standard interior construction, nothing reinforced, nothing unusual. What the team stood examining directly contradicted that description. Metal brackets had been fastened along the inner hinge points, added after manufacture with the kind of precision that suggested a deliberate choice rather than casual modification. When the brackets came off and steady pressure pushed the door open, cooler air moved past the team into the warmer main cabin, and the room beyond appeared completely undisturbed. The bed sat neatly made, sheets yellowed with age but untouched by any hand since 1977. A glass on the nightstand had surrendered its water long ago, leaving a pale ring burned into the wood surface. Curtains held their position halfway across the small window, frozen mid-draw. On the nightstand beside the empty glass, a cassette recorder waited with a serial number that confirmed its manufacture in early 1977, and inside that recorder sat a tape that appeared in no maintenance record and no evidence log in any archive connected to the aircraft or its owner. The wardrobe closet across from the bed held 3 garment bags hanging at even intervals, each containing stage outfits still wrapped in protective covers, each tagged by hand with tour dates scheduled for late 1977 and into 1978. Tours that never happened because the man who would have worn them died in August of that year. A built-in desk along one wall contained a drawer filled with sealed envelopes addressed in Elvis Presley's handwriting, dated to July 1977, and not a single one had ever been mailed or logged in any existing archive. Several addressed business associates. One appeared directed to a family member. The atmosphere in that room shifted because no rational version of events explained what the team was looking at as anything other than deliberate placement, a private world sealed tight and left to wait. Specialist facilities received the envelopes under security escort, and each one was opened under controlled conditions with every movement recorded. The letters inside carried nothing casual in their tone, nothing rushed or emotional, and that composure was precisely what unsettled the people reading them. Pages referenced financial transfers and property instructions laid out with structured precision. Recordings stored separately from official archives were described as private material, not to be released without specific prior approval. A phrase about what Elvis called a private arrangement connected to aviation holdings appeared more than once across multiple letters, as though repetition alone would ensure its weight was understood. Another letter outlined contingency plans in the event of unexpected developments, language that stayed calm on the surface while holding something guarded underneath every line. Forensic analysis confirmed the ink composition and paper stock match materials used in the summer of 1977 without exception. But the shift in tone across several letters pulled most sharply at the attention of everyone reviewing the material. Elvis wrote about feeling watched, about contracts that appeared to be something other than what they claimed on paper, about obligations extending beyond music without ever naming their exact nature. Then came the typed memorandum, and signed, printed on plain paper, folded neatly among the handwritten pages as though someone had placed it there with care. A meeting in May of 1977 between Elvis and unnamed parties regarding long-term protection measures received formal written description in that document, and one line stopped every person in the room. Transportation assets must remain secured. Access strictly limited. The jet, Aviation records would later show the aircraft had been scheduled for interior modifications in September of 1977, and those modifications were canceled quietly after August, after his death. The thicker envelope bearing only the words to be opened if necessary held a single document when examined, and that document outlined instructions for the aircraft itself, directing that it remain closed until conditions were met, conditions described only in the broadest terms without a specific time frame or a named individual responsible for carrying them out. These letters did not read as goodbyes. They read as preparations made for a future that had not yet arrived. The cockpit review came next, and it produced what may have been the most difficult piece of the entire discovery to explain away. Technicians worked through maintenance logs that aligned normally with known schedules until one entry broke the pattern. Dated August 15, 1977, one day before Elvis Presley's reported death, the entry documented fuel calibration procedures, stamped consistently with all prior documentation, and matched to no corresponding flight plan filed with aviation authorities, no air traffic control log, no official record of any movement on that date. Fuel calibration is not a procedure performed on a whim. It prepares an aircraft for accurate range measurement and ensures proper fuel distribution across the expected distance of a specific flight, and none of that is necessary for a plane sitting idle in a hangar. The handwriting in the entry matched neither the primary pilot's script nor any known maintenance personnel associated with the aircraft. The signature line had been left blank. Beneath a removable panel near the navigation console, faint pencil markings caught a technician's eye, and when those markings were copied and plotted, the numbers formed geographic coordinates pointing to a remote stretch of open terrain outside Santa Fe, New Mexico, a location connected to no known performance, no documented meeting, and no recorded activity of any kind during August of 1977. Someone had been preparing that aircraft for a specific departure in the days leading up to August 16th, and official history recorded no such departure ever occurring. The structural scan of the cabin floor produced the final discovery, and it arrived quietly, the way the most unsettling things tend to, through imaging equipment producing a reading that didn't fit. A hollow space nearly 4 feet in length rested beneath the main lounge carpeting at the center of the seating area, and lifting the carpet revealed bolted floor panels concealed under matching material. Non-factory bolts, requiring a specific tool type absent from the original construction manual, held the panels in place, and each one came out under continuous camera recording. The compartment beneath held a sealed metal container showing almost no corrosion, a detail that spoke directly to how carefully it had been closed, and industrial clasps secured its lid. Inside rested audio reels, larger studio-style tapes rather than the cassette found in the sleeping quarters, each labeled by hand in steady black marker with dates written clearly along the outer edges. Some of those dates extended into 1978. Elvis Presley died in August of 1977, and the room holding that discovery went completely silent. Audio engineers worked through preliminary samples under controlled conditions, cleaning and digitizing short segments carefully to protect material that had spent decades in a sealed compartment. When the first clear playback filled that room, the reactions of those present carried a quality that none of the investigators had fully prepared for. The voice sounded strong and clear, noticeably less strained than recordings from his final documented public appearances in 1977, with breath control steadier than the period's known accounts of his physical condition would have suggested, and a delivery firmness that several audio experts noted felt inconsistent with what official history described. Among the reels, musical recordings shared space with extended spoken segments, candid monologues in which the voice described contracts that felt inescapable, a fear of betrayal that attached itself to no specific name, pressure building from directions the speaker never identified directly. The tone held throughout at an unhurried, reflective quality, the sound of someone thinking carefully while remaining fully aware that these words might eventually reach other ears. One recording ended without warning, and the final clear sentence began with the words, "If this ever comes out, it means," before dissolving into interference embedded directly in the tape at the precise moment the sentence approached its most consequential word. No physical break in the material, no visible damage, just distortion where clarity should have followed. The Presley estate's response arrived carefully worded and deliberately measured, with no sweeping denial and no dismissal of the findings sitting anywhere in any public statement released through December of 2025. Legal teams began reviewing intellectual property questions tied to the audio material. Historians cross-referenced timelines. Archivists verified handwriting samples against established reference material. Every statement that emerged from estate representatives circled back to the same theme. Authentication requires time, preservation stays the priority, and conclusions should wait for evidence. And what went unsaid publicly may have carried more weight than what appeared in prepared statements, because the jet had not decayed accidentally across 5 decades. Sealed vents, reinforced doors, hidden floor compartments, waterproof containers built to protect their contents against time. All of it pointed toward the work of someone who understood exactly what needed protecting and exactly how long it might need to stay that way. Graceland continued receiving visitors through December of 2025 as it always had. Music moving through speakers in every room, memorabilia filling display cases, fans gathering outside the gates on Elvis Presley Boulevard in Memphis the way they had for nearly half a century. The legacy those visitors came to experience had been built carefully over years, a portrait of a man defined by talent, charisma, and a kind of magnetic stage presence that changed popular music in ways still felt across every genre that followed. What the jet introduced into that portrait was something more complicated, not scandal in the simple tabloid sense, but a level of forward planning and deliberate concealment that sat awkwardly beside the image of a man simply overwhelmed by circumstance. Letters written in the structured language of preparation rather than farewell. A private cabin reinforced and sealed by someone with specific knowledge of aircraft construction. Coordinates penciled beneath a navigation panel pointing to a location no public record connected to August 1977. Audio recorded past the date of death, or labeled as though it was, sitting beneath the floor of a jet no one had opened in 48 years. Nearly 5 decades after the hangar doors first closed, they opened again in a world carrying tools that 1977 could not have imagined: ink composition analysis, advanced audio forensics, structural density imaging, precision handwriting verification capable of dating materials to specific months within a given year. Whether the timing of that reopening landed by accident or by the unfolding of instructions written long before the moment arrived remains a question no recovered document answers directly. What the evidence does answer, without ambiguity, is that the aircraft was not abandoned. Every sealed vent, every reinforced hinge bracket, every letter dated July 1977 and left unmailed, every reel dated past August 1977 and locked beneath a hidden floor panel, pointed consistently toward a man who was not finishing something. He was protecting it. And the sentence that dissolved into distortion before its final word was spoken, if this ever comes out, it means, carries inside that unfinished thought the only answer that still matters, the one sitting in that distortion exactly where someone made sure it would stay.